go. Good morning, class. Today we are going to talk about lab procedures and cooking methods that you may be using in the foods lab. The first cooking method I want to talk about is pan frying. When you pan fry, you have an amount of fat in a skillet, and that's a pan that's got a round bottom like this, and the pan can have either oil, butter, margarine, a combination of those things, but whatever you choose to do, the oil has to be preheated. For this particular lab, we have some cooked and sliced potatoes that we want to turn into American fries. I like to add onion to that mixture, but a lot of kids don't like onion, so we've omitted the onion for today. I have chosen also to use margarine over butter to fry the food because margarine doesn't burn as easily as butter, but I do have some butter sitting aside here that can be used to put on top of it when they're ready to eat. First things first, when you are working in the foods lab, always wash your hands before you start to work. Soap, water, and sing the happy birthday song in your head. You know, and again, we want the water warm, not cold, and adjust accordingly so it's not so hot that you burn yourself. Now, the other thing I need you to think about is how you're going to set up your sink. If you'll think about it, we talked about this earlier, this is a review. Right sink is going to be hot soapy water, as hot as you can stand it. About an inch or two of water in the bottom, and just a dot about the size of a nickel when it comes to putting that soap in. All right, to the left of the sink area, you're going to have a mat and a draining rack. This is left open so you can wash produce. It's also left open if you need to wash your hands again, things like that. All right, so I'm going to remind people also, did you see how I put that into the garbage? We don't throw anything in class. We certainly need to be careful about that because accidents can happen and we don't want anybody getting hurt. All right, I will say I'm going to start out with a number 5, medium temperature, and warm this a bit. And while this is being warmed, I'm going to talk about some other cooking methods you'll work with in class. We don't cook a lot with the microwave, but I need you to know how to defrost. In this microwave, you'll put your product into the oven, you'll close the door, and then you can push, amount of time, say 3-0, then power level, and I usually do a 2 or 3, and then start. All right, I'm going to turn this off though right away because you don't want to really use your microwave with nothing in it. If I'm baking in the microwave, I'll do what the recipe tells me. If it tells me to cook on a medium setting, I do the same thing, but a medium setting is a number 5. And if I'm cooking on high, I just put in the time. In this case, I'm talking about taking a delicata squash, putting a little water inside, and baking that using the microwave. Vegetables are one thing we can do in the microwave that turn out really well. In this, I'm going to probably set it for 2 minutes and then give it something called standing time. Standing time allows microwaves to penetrate to the center, especially if something's really dense, like a potato or squash, and it prevents overcooking. So I'm going to take and push 2, 0, 0, and start. Now some people might put a cover over that. In this case, I'm just leaving it. There are those who would say, hey, cover it with a little saran wrap. Others say paper towel because they're not real keen about melted plastic wrap on their food. Okay, now let's talk about preheating our oven because we're also going to bake some squash, the other half of that. To bake in the oven, we first check to make sure our oven rack is centered. Then we will push the bake, the arrow up until we get to 350 in this case, and then bake again. There'll be a preheat light on and an oven light on. And once the preheat light goes out, I'm ready to put my product in the oven. In this case, we've got the other half of the delicata squash. I can put a little butter in there. I can put some brown sugar in there. Delicata squash is very sweet to begin with, so I'm probably going to just leave it as is. Some people also like the idea of maybe putting a little water in bottom of the pan, allow that steam to help the product bake, and then I'm just going to shield it by putting the foil over the top. Now, I'm hearing this make some noise, So I'm going to turn it off, even though there's still some time left. And I'm going to let it stand. I will continue baking that until when I press, push the fork inside, it's tender. All right, we're going to pretend that oven is preheated. Usually takes about 5 minutes. We are then going to put our product into the oven and set our oven timer. To set the timer, you push the timer button, then you push the arrow up. We're going to say 15 minutes, and then push the timer again. Now, you notice that sizzle. That means my pan is hot. I'll adjust the heat if I need to, but next I'm going to take my potatoes, and when they sizzle like this, it means I'm at the right temperature. I could choose to pop it up a little higher if I want to. I can choose to cover the pan. I can choose to leave the pan uncovered, kind of personal preference. Here's where you're going to have trouble. Leave it alone. Don't stir it. Don't futz with it. This would be true if you were making hash browns as well. And what you're going to do is set your timer, maybe for 3 minutes, and then you're going to lift and check. When it's brown, then you'd flip your product and brown it on the other side. Once it's browned on both sides, ready to serve. All right, so I've got a tray here where I'm going to be, setting my dirty utensils. You might choose a plate. I also want to review some safety. Every time I do lab, I see people take sharp knives and leave it in the dishwater. Want to remember, whenever you're washing a very sharp knife, they are washed separately. And my wash water is as hot as I can stand it, and so is my rinse water. Water as hot as you can stand. Okay, I'm going to ask you to kind of watch that while I talk about this next thing. If you see them start to brown, that's going to be an indication to turn it, okay? Since you're not touching the food, I'm not going to really worry about you having clean hands, but I want to talk about one more thing. My students always have problems remembering if I need to measure an eighth a teaspoon or a dash, that I fill the quarter teaspoon halfway. One of the persons in my class once said, well, gee, why don't we just put a dash in? I don't like the term dash because dash can mean different things depending on the container you have. For example, I got my seasoned salt, nature seasoning, got myself a little pepper here, got myself a little salt. If I chose to make a dash out of each one of these, here's my dash of seasoned salt. Seasoning salt. Here's my, I did 2 dashes. That was actually 2 dashes of nature seasoning. And there's 1 dash of pepper. As you can see, those amounts are very different. That's why we, even though it's a small amount and you're seasoning to taste, that you would use the measuring spoon so you don't over season any of your product. And remember, before you serve everything in my class, you taste it. Nothing is served unless it's tasted first. I did not season these at all because I prefer to season things afterwards. If I'm serving this to guests, I certainly would want them to choose the amount of salt and pepper or whatever they want to put on it. Butter already has a little salt in it, so we'll take it as is. Thank you for your help. Now, I know you can't see this yet, but it is starting to brown. We're going to end our tape here, and you'll just have to take my word for it. When these are browned on both sides, we're ready to serve. Thank you for your time, and now we're going to get to work doing our lab.